I'm going to get a little more exacting. I'm going to get a little more into the nitty gritty. And I'm going to talk about what we encountered at our clinic when we hit some challenges when we were trying to do our validation imaging for the internal positioning. So, conflicts of interest, I got the big old 0. I paid my own way and everything. Have to, compliance, we won't go there. Okay, so just to kind of give you an introduction and background, I've been at my current facility for like the past 12 years. When I first came there, we actually had Siemens Primuses, we had the Radionics X-Knife. Prior to that, I worked on Gamma Knife and so forth. So I'm gonna start when we got our trilogy, when this journey kind of started mostly for us. So previously, we had the Varian Trilogy machine. We used Varian Z-Med localization. You've heard that a lot from a lot of people, which is using, you could use like 6 LEDs if you're doing an invasive frame. You've seen a lot of pictures of people with the mask and the bite block with another 6 their reflective fiducials and such. And it had its own couch mount, 3 degrees of freedom, and a cone collimator system. And also, again, we used an invasive frame. We tried the mask and the bite block system. We didn't care for it. We felt it put too much responsibility in the patient's hands. So we actually carried over what we were using from our X-Knife and used this. It's called a GTC, a Gil Thomas Cushman head frame. If you want to know more about it, come and talk to me later. Our current equipment, so we've made some changes. So back in 2012, Varian put out an end-of-life bulletin. Z-Med was hitting the dust. We were putting a bullet in it. And so basically this end-of-life in 2012 said, beginning in February of 2014 to the end of 2016, we'll do the best we can, but then as of the 1st of 2017, you're on your own. Okay? So that started our process to say, okay, what can we find out there commercially to replace it? And we went with Vision RT's Align RT system. Now, because I still have a Varian Trilogy and I have the 120 MLC leads, which are 5 millimeters wide, we still are utilizing and keeping our Z-Med cones. It's just a collimator. There's no interface connection inside. We still use it because we have a very, very active SRS program. And in the last couple of years, as we've heard in the talks today, we're going away from whole brain and going and treating all these mets. A lot of our mets are very tiny. And by tiny, I mean we're treating less than 1 cm. So with 5 millimeter leaves, I only got 2 leaves. That's not very conformal. So we still have our cones and we still use them. And then getting away from an invasive frame in our GTC, going to the open face mask. Again, during the talks we've seen this morning, a lot of people have been using the Citco mask, which we did too. That's what we started with. But we found, based on our past experience, that we found them too flexible for us. So we went back out to the community and brought in Q-Fix, which we like because it's more rigid, and it actually has, it's the same Aquaplast, but they reinforce it with Kevlar. It's stiffer, and we find we don't see the shrinkage either after the fact. And we actually made one on our physician, which was great, because then they could really feel, we made both of them, and that was huge. So if you can get your physicians to buy in and make a mask on them, that's gonna be a huge hurdle to convince them. And in the future, we're hoping in the next year to get a true beam. I'm jealous of everybody here already has one. We're gonna try and finally get rid of our cones, at least on one of our Linux, and go to the high def MLCs. We already got our localization done. I'm really looking forward to getting a 6-degree freedom treatment table, because right now our system is kind of broken into 2 parts, like a lot of people have said this morning. We also have the 3-degree of freedom Vision RT table extension, and that covers just our rotational aspects of those 3 degrees, and the others are covered by the LINAC table. We're looking forward to seeing what Varian's coming up with their advanced imaging capabilities, and we got our mobilization under control. So let's get going. So again, we got our system in the fall of 2014. We took a year to figure out how this was going to integrate into our program. Okay, again, I'm going to reference back to the talks today. We got to get from point A to point B. Everybody's workflow is different. How you integrate it is different. There's no absolute right or wrong way. Okay, you're just getting from point A to point B, making sure you're treating your patients accurately, and you're feeling confident about it. So, took us a year. last fall, last October, we did our first case. Kept it simple. He had a single lesion. Yay! That single lesion was located within the Varian cone beam CT safe zone. I'm going to talk about that in the next couple of slides just to give a little more detail. Those of you who are Varian users, then it might sound familiar, but I'm assuming that I'm going to make a broad assumption it's kind of the same things and parameters with Electa, if you still have a Siemens, and so forth. So, getting back, first patient, set him up to the DICOM ISIS center, zeroed out all the parameters, all our deltas, online RT, did our cone beam, made any shifts per imaging results, captured a new reference image, treated our patient. Textbook, just how we were taught. Got through the first one. So, why am I talking about cone beam CT safe zone and why is this important? You'll find out in a little bit. So, I tried to kind of do this on a phantom and relate it into something that's a little more easy to visualize. And so what it is that with the Varian Linac, to do a cone beam CT, that there is hard-coded into the system table vertical and lateral parameters that you can't override and you can't change them. It is what it is. It's this safe house. And what that means is that if your table is within these parameters, you can bring the imaging arms out and you can take an image and you're not going to run into the table and hopefully also not your patient. We can't account for what's sticking out on the patient. Now, you have the main portion of your house, your safe house. This one is if your table vertical goes from 0 to 15, if you drop it down, if you have a patient who's got an anterior lesion, it's within 0 to 15, and it's within a lateral range of plus or minus 5, you're golden. You should be able to take cone beam CT, no problems. Then, you still have the attic space in your safe house. However, your roof peaks. Same thing here. When you start dropping your couch much below 15, that lateral range starts getting reduced linearly. And that's what this table is right here. So at 15 couch, you still have plus or minus 5. You go to 16, plus or minus 4. So on and so forth. So that when you hit a table vert of 20, you better have your table lat dead center. Okay? And then obviously, anything beyond this, outside of your safe house, you're not going to be able to do a cone beam CT in one shot. And this is what hit us. So almost exactly a week later, we have our second case. This one has 3 lesions. Now, again, what I'm talking about can be applied to one lesion, could be applied to multiple lesions, each with their own ISIS center. This would even apply to one where you have multiple lesions but treated with one ISIS center. You have to be aware of this, and this is why. So we had a patient, 3 lesions. Turns out, which we found out after the fact, 2 of those, or during the treatment, 2 of those lesions were outside of the Varian cone beam CT safe zone. So the first one we set up to was one of these 2. Set it up just like we did the week before, zeroed everything out, then we went to go perform our cone beam. Linac comes up. Sorry, I'm not going to let you bring out the arms. Your table is too far laterally or too far vertically. I'll move it into the safe zone and let you take your cone beam. Once I'm done, retract the arms and I'll go back to your starting point. We've done this. If you have a Varian, you've experienced this, no biggie. Here's where we hit the wall. We had everything nicely zeroed out with our Align RT. The Linac put the couch in the safe zone, went back. We had major deltas. We weren't zeroed anymore. So now, what were these deltas due to? Linac mechanics, or did our patient move? Now we go down the rabbit hole. We did it like 3 or 4 more times until we finally said stop. Okay, we're fighting a losing battle. We're not we're just chasing our tails. So how do we attack this? And I have to give kudos to the therapist and the physicist who did this because they figured this part out on the fly in that high stress situation. Now, before I go there, why was I seeing this? What is my conflict? Again, at the beginning I said, this is what I'm working with right now. I don't have a true beam. I don't have a 6 degree of freedom tabletop, okay? I have a variant trilogy with a 120 MLC, but I'm using it in conjunction with Vision RT. This is a C-series platform LINAC. This is 1980s technology still. They've just put fancy names and attached a lot of stuff to it, okay? I'm dealing with an analog system that is only accurate to 1 to 2 millimeters, but that's hey, if you go to your commissioning and your ATP, that's all varying guarantees. I have an analog system. I am dealing with potentiometer pot readouts. But I'm trying to use it in conjunction with a digital readout system, which is accurate to 1/10 of a millimeter. Got an apple, I got an orange. Now what? Gotta make a fruit salad somewhere. So we decided, and what we figured out is we need to break this in our imaging when we're outside the safe zone into 2 parts. Take care of the rotational part, and we do that, the pitch roll and rotation. Only way you can do it is we have to get a cone beam CT, and we utilize it with our tabletop extension. Once we have taken out any rotational results from imaging, we then move on to the translational components. Vert, lat, and launch, we do that via KV images and with our variant table. Okay? Now, 2 parts for imaging, that's one more step you have to do. Is there any way we could have done something ahead of time to prevent this? So we went back to the drawing board. Is there any way we could have prevented our patient that anterior lesion from being outside the safe zone? Could we have maybe dropped their head? Could we have maybe done something at the time of SIM? So what we looked at is, again, we spent a year evaluating this and the localization, and we did some of our tests with primary brain treatments, and we went back and looked at those. When we were making headrests, we're like, well, make it thick, it'll be comfy for the patient, it'll make them more comfortable. We were already losing 5 to 7 cm of vertical right off the bat. So we're like, ounce of prevention. What can we do to prevent that? Let's make it thinner. Here's another demo of that. Okay? Maybe we can do that. Now there's not much you can do laterally, maybe a little bit, but they're centered on the CT table, how they're going to be centered. So we might be able to help with the vertical. However, as other people have said, we're dealing with living, breathing people. They may be highly kyphotic. They might have a body habitus. They might have back problems. They might not just want to lay down flat. So we are trying to make them comfortable with a non-invasive frame, and we want them to hold still. So sometimes you have to build it up. You don't get a choice. You tell the SIM, try to make it as thin as possible. I have a very anterior lesion. Do what you can to help me. This patient could not lay flat. They had to build him up. Okay? When they built him up and we looked at the CT images, this distance, 21 cm. I already know ahead of time, but I know ahead of time. I'm not in the heat of the moment. Same patient, but this one's okay. This one's about 12 and a half and it's only offset a little bit. Again, knowing that ahead of time gets you prepped, and it also helps you. Maybe we do those difficult ones, those 2-part ones when everybody's fresh. Patient's fresh, we're fresh, we're all thinking, and we'll leave the easier ones to the end of the treatment. Help yourself out and plan at the beginning to help yourself out at the time of treatment. The other thing that we started doing, we're like, well, how can we really make sure if we know if we're in the safe zone or not? We actually do a dry run field verification prior to treatment, like a day or 2 before. We get the plan done, we send it off, and we verify it. And here it says yes, no, and maybe. If we have anybody like on the cusp, we've had it where we have people during dry run and the table parameters were fine, and then we get them to the day of treatment. Again, I have a living, breathing person, they move. Might not set up exactly right, and I was just on the cusp, but now I don't have everything in place, so now I have a delay. So even if we think we're on the cusp, do the work up front, it'll save you time at the end. So, how do we go about doing this? How did you break it up? So here was a patient 1, 2, 3, 4 isocenters we had to treat. Guess what? 1, 2, 3 of the 4 are outside the safe zone. How do we do it? Here's the actual treatment plan right here. I'm going to fall, I know it. And what we did is we copied this plan and we created an image-only plan. Okay? All we're going to do with this one is be able to cone beam CT. And with this image-only plan, we are controlling the shift. We are controlling the shift because we can use our digital system to tell us. Okay? So we're controlling it. We're not letting the LINAC pick and choose. We're controlling it. And that is something I can track and monitor throughout this whole process. It's a known, not an unknown. Okay? So here's an example. So we had one lesion. The vertical was at 20.5. My lat was 1.8. I'm outside the safe zone. Okay? I know I'm going to have to do it. How do I do it? Here's the treatment isocenter. We only move one. We're only going to do one movement. We have found that you really only have to pick one. I don't think we've had, since we started doing this, had to move both laterally and vertically. Let's just keep it down to one number we're tracking, one motion we're making on the couch. So for this one, we took that 6.3 of vertical out of it. So now I went from 20.5 to 14.2. And if I'm in 14.2, I can have that couch lat. I'm within it. I'm within my safe house. I know that. That's something I can track throughout the whole process. So here we go. We bring up our image-only isocenter. Zero everything out. Same step as we've always done. Then we take our first cone beam. We see what if we have any rotations. Turns out we do. We have a pitch we got to get rid of. Again, I don't care what's going on over here. I'm only concerned about rotational. I'm just concentrating on these 3 degrees of freedom. So we're going to go in the room and we're going to make an adjustment to all those zeros. We're now going to introduce that 1.1 degree pitch. But when I do that, all of a sudden now I get a vert and a launch error. And where the heck is that from? The results you get from your cone beam CT are rotation, like if my knuckle is my isocenter, it's rotations around that isocenter. I don't have a 6 degree of freedom couch. I have something where I can do my rotations, but I'm not rotating around isocenter, I'm rotating at their neck. I'm doing my pitches, my rolls, and my rotations at their neck. Well, if I do that, of course I'm going to pull that with a pitch. I'm going to move it vertically. I'm going to move it longitudinally. So in order to put that isocenter back, I have to zero these out. So once we do any kind of rotations, we only concentrate on applying them here and zeroing out any resulting translational shifts because of that. Because I am not rotating around isocenter, I am rotating at the base of their neck with my equipment. If I have a 6 degree of freedom tabletop, I won't have to worry about that. So we've done that. And this is where we get our first reference surface. 0, 1.1, they're holding still. I take my reference. And now I'm using a liner T the way it's meant to be used, to monitor the patient while I'm figuring out what's going on with imaging. Okay? So I'm going and doing my second cone beam CT. Did I get rid of it? Did I do everything correctly? Yes, I did. But now I might still have some translational shifts. Again, I'm at my image isocenter, but I'm going to zero those out. But you have to remember, if you did your known shift in the vert or the lat, this will add or subtract from it if you apply this. So we might just apply just the longitudinal, okay? We can keep track of that. Once we have applied any remaining translational shifts, we take a second reference surface. Again, now I'm going to move to my treatment isocenter, but I want to monitor the patient, that during this whole process, the patient is holding still. So now we're going to translational. So now what we do is we now go to our treatment isocenter. Well, I've taken out any rotations, I've taken out any translations outside of the fixed one I've done, and now I'm going to go to the treatment isocenter. So in theory, my treatment isocenter should only be moving the couch down 6.28 cm. Okay? I can use it as a double check. Now, Align RT can't do that big of a range, but you could use your linen couch to get close and then go the rest of the way. Okay? I'm only going to zero out what I know, what I adjusted myself. The other thing is, double check yourself. I did a 1.1 degree pitch. So if I go back to my treatment isocenter, which was what my image one was, and I corrected a 1.1 degree pitch, I should have zeros and I should actually see a 1.1 degree pitch. Here's another second check. Here's how you can methodically cross-check yourself. Does this all make sense? At this point, once I've done it, I'm in the room, I capture a third reference. I don't care, I'll capture 50 references. It's non-ionizing radiation. I'm using this to make sure that while I'm trying to figure out what's going on and I'm positioning things within plus or minus a millimeter internally to the patient, they're not moving while I have my back turned. We go and check. We do our 2D. Again, if there's any additional translations, we will apply them. And we get our fourth and final reference. And now we're ready to go for treatment. Okay? It's a lot. I get it. It's a lot. But this is for us. We do it methodically. We have things to cross-check ourselves, because at the end of the day, we have to know that we've treated this patient within plus or minus a millimeter and go to bed at night. And this is what we've figured out. Now, other helpful hints in this whole journey. We have found that this pre-treatment dry run field verification has provided us with invaluable information, and not just about safe zone evaluation. We also look at this and we do truly a dry run field verification. We check to see if there's any collisions. I'm still dealing with cones. Okay, I'm still dealing with, while I have, this system set up, within its mechanical parameters and the table, I got body parts kind of hanging off that couch. So I want to make sure I'm not hitting them. If I have any gantry or table issues, I may need to go all the way back to the treatment plan. I'd rather know that now than the day of treatment. Okay, other things that we do and look at is camera blockage or anything else, and I'll talk about anything else in a minute. We had to come up with something generic. So what we do there is we are doing these arcs. We have 3 cameras. We have a very small region of interest. All of a sudden we're going through our dry run and we're blocking one of the cameras enough that now Align RT is telling us, well, your patient moved, you're outside of your deltas are beyond your 1 millimeter. No, they're not. So there's not enough data from that one camera to accurately calculate, and we're getting a false negative from Align RT. Do we worry about that? Okay, maybe, we went from our ZMed where we were trying to be efficient in treatment going clockwise and counterclockwise. Now we either start from 0 or from 180. If during our arc, it's just the last 5, 10, or 15 degrees, but we've monitored them for the most part, we have MMI, we have the motion management interface between Align RT and our Trilogy. Okay, it will shut off the beam. So the thing is, when this was happening in the past, we would flip around to our doctor and we're like, are you okay with us going out of autopilot and going into manual mode? I don't know. We document this so our doctors, when they're asked that, everybody's comfortable, everybody knows what's going on. The doctor knows, okay, this one we're going to have blockage, they're going to take it out of autopilot. I'm going to monitor the patient. They are not moving, I'm okay with it, I trust it, finish the treatment. And the other thing too is, with this camera blockage, this is our time to maybe modify our region of interest. Maybe we didn't create a very good region of interest. Maybe if we just tweak this a little bit or open it up a little bit, we don't see this. And then the other thing too with that region of interest, when we fine tune it, you saw all those different isocenters I had on that previous one. I had like 5 or 6. We copy and paste that same region of interest across the board. So we're always setting up consistently to the same region of interest. Because if it's even tweaked a little bit, that can throw you off. Okay? And sometimes too with this, maybe we kick the couch a little bit and we have no problem. Again, we can go back to the treatment planning system. Do it before you get the patient on the table. Now, one of the big ones we found by doing this is patient comfort. Some of these patients haven't had whole brain. Some of these patients haven't had radiation. They've had CT scans, they've had MRs, they've had imaging. They know what to expect for that. So here you do, and you walk them in the first day of treatment. They come in this maze, this big room, this behemoth of a machine. You now put me on a hard table, strap me down, and throw a red light in my face. That's overwhelming if you've never experienced that before. Now they know what to expect. It's not the brand new, it's not the unknown. The other thing is, it helps us to evaluate the patient. Hey, Mr. Smith, you were fine during CT, and you seem to be real fidgety right now. What's different? Well, I didn't take my, I took my Ativan because I usually have a hard time with CT scans, but I figured I didn't need it for this. How long does it take for that to kick in for you? 20 minutes? Why don't you take that 20 minutes before you come? Let's, now you know what to expect. Yeah, I think I will. Or they were fine during CT and MR, and then all of a sudden we get them to the dry run and they just lose it. Let's get your prescriptions for some Vicodin. Why don't we do that? Take the edge off. So you're comfortable, we made you as comfortable as possible, and now you know what to expect. We've had other patients where we are not going to stay within a millimeter. Doctor, we need to reevaluate the plan. Do we need to open up the margin on the PTV? Do we need to open up the margin on our aligning RT? Are you comfortable with that? Other times, there is no way. They are not going to hold still. Maybe we need to do multifraction, maybe we need to scrap the whole thing. You want to know that before the day of treatment. This has been invaluable to us. So, the last thing we've done, and I can't take credit for this hint, this one we borrowed or stole from the summer meet or the spring clinical meeting. We've also started now placing skull and GTV contours on our DRRs. It just gives the doctor that much more information to work with when they're doing the image alignment, because now that's your baseline, that's your gold standard that everything builds off of. So, what were our lessons learned? Whether you're treating one lesion, whether you're treating multiple lesions, each one having an isocenter, or multiple lesions with one treatment isocenter, you need to be aware of where that isocenter is and whether you're going to put yourself in or out of the safe zone. We have found in our clinic, with the equipment that we have, that breaking it down into a two-step approach helps us methodically and carefully do the process, double check ourselves that we feel confident that we are putting that treatment isocenter where it needs to be within plus or minus a millimeter, especially for our SRS patients. And lastly, we have just really found that the dry run field verification gives us so much information ahead of time. It's a pound of prevention in our case, because we figure a lot of stuff out so that when it comes to treatment day, and you don't have a lot of time, because you ran behind on this one, and now you got all these patients, minimum delays, and hopefully no more surprises. So, I did not come up with this all by myself, okay? It takes a village, it takes a department. I have to think we have a very involved physician. In fact, when we were figuring out with the masks and such, he was one of our volunteers. God bless him. If you can get your doctor to do it, I suggest it, because then they really understand. Rest of the physics team, a number of our therapists have been involved since step one, so I have to give them kudos. And that's it. Any questions? I know it's a lot, so anything I can answer.
So I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for him, but the two-step translation and step adjustments, is that an issue with the 60 stuff?
Well, first of all, your 60 is not going to, your 3-off's not going to be needed with your 60 couch.
With a 6 degree of freedom, I'm thinking if you're outside the safe zone, you're outside the safe zone. You know, so my personal opinion, and again, until I get my hands on my own, I'm not going to know for sure. So I'm thinking I'm probably still going to do some sort of this, but the whole thing where now when I get my cone beam CT result, I can do all of it at once because I'm rotating and translating around isocenter as opposed to doing stuff back by the neck. So I really feel, again, I won't know until I prove it to myself, that I'll still run into this with a 6 degree freedom couch top myself, personally.
Whenever you do a couch, you experience couch sag. It doesn't matter what you do with this Zemed whole nerve rest there to have the same effect. Okay, so this correction of each neuron roll has to be done before you do your translation.
Yeah. Any kind of, and we found that with Zemed too. Anytime you're going to do any kind of pitch roll or rotation, it's going to have some translational effects because of it. You know, it's going to
Question is,
influence.
why cone beam CT? You're treating head, so why not just use KV?
Because I don't get everything, I don't get as much information, and I don't get all 6 degrees of freedom. I think I got to think about this. Its role is very subtle when you try doing 2D matching. You can get it, but you have to have a pretty severe role for it to really show up. So cone beam CT truly gives you all 6 degrees, all 3 rotational and all 3 translational.
Vision RT would tell you.
Yeah, but again, my Vision RT is not my primary per se. I'm making it my primary, but I'm using internal imaging to validate. That's now my baseline. And then once I know that that's correct, then I snap and I get my surface rendering, and now I use that now for the rest of the treatment. But this is all that validation up front. And that's all done internally with imaging. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead.
Sorry, I've forgotten from your workflow. Do you do a final KB imaging after the final shift to get verification that there's no more?
Oh, after the, if our 2D images show it?
Yeah.
No, typically we don't. We typically don't.
Are you worried about that, considering what I understood from your presentation about
Yeah.
the safe zone
If-
is that you're worried about?
Actually, a lot of times,
translation
we're
and
not,
how-
when we apply the shifts, we're going in a room. And we're looking and seeing. That was the other thing. When you look at this analog with the potentiometer, when you look at your cone beam CT, let me see if I can go out quicker here. A little bit, get there. Okay. These are in terms of CM. That 0.1 CM, that's got a big old range. That's just a pot. That could actually be 0.055555, or that could be 0.144444 CM. So what we do is when this says 0.1 right at the end, we will actually go in the room and move it until it, and then we use, again, our digital readout system to see how much we're actually using. And that has been a bone of contention with our doctors, because we said, you're dealing with terms of millimeters comparing to tenths of a millimeter. So for them to have a comfort level, we've actually now started, instead of just hitting apply shift out in the room, out in the control area, we actually go in and do it. And we use Align RT to tell us we're actually hitting a CM or once we get there. And we can do another KB, which is nicer because it's quick and it's not as much imaging dose. Because we've already done 2 cone beams, we might even do a 3rd if we think the patient's not holding still.
But it's not our regular practice.
Typically, it's not our regular practice. Typically, we're really not seeing too much when we go for that second one, in our experience. So, anything else?
You can have couch
You can't cone beam CT on a couch case. I've done all of this work at 0 to go and validated everything with imaging at 0, because that's the only place I can do it.
You're using Vision RT.
Yeah, then we use Vision RT. So once I've validated internally and everything is correct, now I snap externally, and now that is what I'm going to use for the rest of, to initiate my treatment for each ISIS center. Anything else? Yes.
So, I just have a question. So, about what's the maximum rotational values you would apply before you start adjusting the patient?
Okay, and I can't remember which speaker talked about it, and I actually made, I wondered if someone would ask me that, and I actually made a little diagram. Aren't you smart? Okay. Let's see if I can pull this up. No, the current slide, here we go. Okay, so we are dealing with, especially when we have a single ISIS center in a single lesion. we're rotating about itself. So we kind of, it is just a trigonometry. If you have your isocenter, and these are all in terms of cm, so here's a 1 cm core, here's a 1 cm lesion. If I have my isocenter in the center of that 1 cm lesion, I can do up to a degree of rotation, and I'm only seeing 0.009 cm, 0.09 millimeters of any kind of linear translation. This becomes more important to us when I get my hands on that high-def MLC, because that 2 by 2, that 2.5 millimeters wide MLC leads goes out to 8 by 8. That's where I'm going to start being concerned, because especially if I have a single isocenter treating multiple lesions, that rotation is going to be extremely important, because 1 degree with the isocenter here, and if I have a lesion out 8, I'm 1.4 millimeters off. So, but when you are in the center of your lesion, heck, even with a 30, I'm a half a millimeter. And that's radius. That could be 60 or 6 cm and such. So typically, when we see 0.1, we even actually go up to 0.5, because right now a lot of our lesions are very small, and a lot of them we're using cones on. So that doesn't matter as much to us in the rotation. Our doctors will accept up to 0.5. Have we had some bigger lesions where we've actually used our MLC or 5 millimeters? Yes, we have. And then we get a lot more picky about it. Does that help? Does that visual help? Okay. Anything else?
Good.
Thank you.
Sound like a great job.